Hello everyone, my name is Mary Kim, or you may also know me as Icy Kim. I am an illustrator and 2D animator. I am a self-taught artist and also self-taught as an animator. I started digital art around late 2019 and started sharing my journey as an artist and a self-taught illustrator all across social media and such. And after I got comfortable at digital illustration, I got motivated and inspired to start animating also. One of the reasons why I started animating was because of the fight scenes that I've seen from shows and any animated material there is, especially when it comes to anime. Fight scenes, animated fight scenes in general, are really super impressive to look at. It's one of the most climatic scenes that you can see in a show, and I just got so inspired that I wanted to start making ones also. Now, learning 2D animation on my own is quite a challenge, but compared to the experience back then, is vastly different. 2D animation and learning materials from it is quite much more accessible right now than it has ever been because of the internet. I didn't have to go to colleges or formal education. I just had to look up through the internet and that's about it. Even with all of those free resource knowledge and whatever I could find, it was quite still lacking in terms of expanding from the mechanics because learning the mechanics is much more easier than trying to come up with something on your own. That was the most challenging part. The resources and tutorials on how to make an animation or how to make your drawing smooth in general are quite plenty. By the time we come to specific themes like action based animations, combat, special effects, is something that isn't easy to look up anywhere. And despite the lack of resources for action and fighting animations, they're also really intimidating to begin with because of the workload it possesses, and it kind of makes it complicated and difficult to try for beginners. It certainly requires commitment, patience, and a lot of time to get through, but the results really phase off. I want to break it down and introduce you guys to techniques that are commonly utilized at fighting animation, and in a way to make it animating those efficiently and make it more of a easy to digest of a task, since we all know that animation in general is super time consuming. Now, I'd like you to introduce to the category of animation and the scope of what we go through the class. This is mainly using 2D animation as a whole, so using frame by frame animation techniques. I'll also only be using a few simple features that could be done by using technology. But overall, we'll be mainly sticking to the traditional route where we draw the frames for it. I'll also be focusing on the motion also. So none of my characters are quite sketched with fancy designs, but if you would like to put some designs to your characters in motion, feel free to do so. I mainly use them this way mainly because it saves up time and focusing on the motion. The tech for animation has really evolved through the years. We can also integrate 3D tools with our animation, and even more and more tools and mechanics to lessen the workload and create animations more conveniently and saves up time tremendously. Although, despite the numerous possibility to enhance the efficiency of it, time is still a huge deal in terms of production. But even all of those getting in the way, I want to make sure to keep it simple. With this lesson, we'll be trying to keep it basic, for this is something about how to get started from. Like, we are just in the beginning phase of trying out fighting animations. With all those crazy tech, it's so easy to get lost. That's why getting started is something so hard to get done by beginners, and a hindering factor on why we couldn't continue. Do you know that I'll only be using and showing you guys my own way of producing an animation, along with techniques I use to enhance the intensity of my animations. Fighting in action is about the thrill and intensity, of course. The software I mainly use is Clip Studio Paint X. If you have another software that you personally prefer using, feel free to do so. Most of the stuff we'll be going through are quite applicable to most alternative software available there is. The reason I mainly use Clip Studio Paint for most of my projects is because of its versatility. Since I'm also an illustrator, I also want to have a workspace that I can illustrate with or I can draw with. And since Clip Studio also has an animation feature built in along with illustration features, I decided to stick with it because it's so convenient for my working process. Clip Studio is also known for being a software that used and set as a standard within the anime industry, so it was a worthy investment to learn and get comfortable with the software. Of course, there are also other software that are quite known and generally used within the industry, such as Toon Boom Harmony, TV Paint, Adobe Animate, or Flash, and even at Photoshop, surprisingly. There are also some free alternatives that you can try out if you're in a tighter budget, like Krita Blender, which is primarily known for being a 3D software, but is now also capable of 2D animation and also perhaps many more. Picking out some software to use can be another thing to be confused about, but I really just recommend to stick where you can be comfortable with and where you think that you can get the most out of. I really don't think it's something that you should be super stressed about it either, because adapting to a software is much more better use of your time instead of wasting it by having no progress at all and being wasted to being so stressed out on what to choose. But I also do recommend to do at least some careful research for it though. I'll be showcasing some of the basic animation features that are available in Clip Studio Paint, and perhaps you can see the features as your basis to seek an alternative for it. I'll be showing the tools and workspace that I use and how to make the most out of it later down the road. I'll also try to go in depth to extra or somewhat advanced features that you can add to your animations, such as camera function and interpolation or parallaxing. I'll be discussing more about those in detail later on, although the software could only go as far as being a function. At the end of the day, we are the ones who would be responsible of the input and drawings, and how the motion would end up as a whole, and what to create exactly. Now for the syllabus. The first section of the lecture is all about refreshing our knowledge when it comes to 2D animation. We'll be going through the exact basics of what makes up motion and how exactly these individual sequences of pictures move. Lecture 2 will have a brief look to the fundamentals and some introduction to the 12 principles of animation. I also want to cover the mindset and how an animator perceives action or break down movement to translate it into drawings and to create an animation. In Lecture 3, I'll be covering the differences of frame rate and which one we'll be using. I also kind of want to distinguish the debate and misunderstanding when it comes to the numbers of frame rate and the debate which ones are better. I'll also be demonstrating on animating on 1s, 2s, and 3s and 4s, and when to use them and use a tool called the timing chart to keep track of the motion. Lecture 4 will be looking at how to draw in-betweens in various ways. In-betweening is the process of smoothing the animation, so it's kind of crucial to go in depth there, and to know how to position and draw them precisely when depicting motion. Lecture 5, I'll be giving you on a tour of the software that I am using, which is Clip Studio Paint. It is quite important to be familiar and comfortable with the software we're using. It is our workspace after all, and just to make it less of a hassle when we get to create anything with an effective and efficient manner. Next, we have adding action to our characters. We finally get to animate and start giving some movement to figures and characters. Lecture 6, I'll be demonstrating and showcasing the dexterity and poses that a character can possess. Instead of practicing with a walk cycle, I thought animating a punch would be much more in theme of what we're doing. In Lecture 7, I'll be showing you how to build up a sequence of moves, transitioning from one to another, to create a basic choreography in one character. A single punch wouldn't suffice, especially when it comes to a hand-to-hand combat. We can build up a sequence from individual poses combined together and create tempo to balance engage and disengaging action. In Lecture 8, we're finally going to begin on making a fight scene. Once you master and get to know how to make one character move, it's time to add in another and create an interaction between the two or more characters. Interacting characters is similar to communication. There's a giver and a receiver. There are many different choices and possibilities of how could they interact, but we can easily break it down based on how they can react. In Lecture 9, we'll be adding weapons. Characters could use tools and interact with them also. Weapons are quite a common tool present when it comes to action sequences. There are also a ton of possibilities and tools that your character can use, so we'll try to be categorizing it into two to make it simpler. And they're quite common and based on their functionality, which are range and melee weapons. Now, an action animation wouldn't be complete without its impact and intensity, so I'll be showcasing you some techniques on how to add them into your fight scenes. Lecture 10 would be all about animating special effects that you can add as a way to indicate a strike or impact. Even as simple as specks or dust can make a difference. Visual effects could also be a part of your character's ability that they can utilize. They may wield powers depending on certain elements, like fire, water, and lightning, and many more you can think of. It can be a way to create impact through the settings and environment also, like with the use of explosions and smoke. Lecture 11 is all about impact frames, utilizing contrast and black and white frames as a way to depict large and flashy sequences. It's one of the most effective to add into your animation, and one I consider one of the most easiest technique that you could learn. Lecture 12 will be talking about a tool that is so convenient and easy that it's quite easy to mess up. There are various forms of motion that a camera can be used. Camera motion isn't always a must, but regardless of that, it really is effective to add into an animation and to create more motion and pacing and intensity through the whole thing. Lecture 13 is where we start to add in some depth and backgrounds to our character. We'll be starting with an easy one, and perhaps doesn't require you to redraw the frames over and over, but instead make use of still images and let technology do its magic by automatic in-betweening or interpolation to our convenience. Lecture 14 is about animated backgrounds. When characters are moving into different positions, it's quite logical for the background to move also just like the characters. Animated backgrounds create so much depth and makes it more immersive and appealing because of its movement and how aligned it is with the moving characters. I'll be demonstrating on more how I depict moving backgrounds and what techniques I use for it. To the next section, we'll be composing combat. With all the elements and knowledge to animation is done, it's time to actually get to know how to compose and create a full-blown sequence and an action scene. Lecture 15 emphasizing the importance of planning. I can't stress enough that animation can take up so much time and energy to create, let alone an action or fighting animation, where there are sets of moves, characters, environments, and many more elements present in a single scene. Creating a guide and a plan is also helpful to keep yourself in track. Making changes is less harsher and make sure you have a smooth sailing process on animating. I'll be showing you ways I personally plan ahead, or perhaps how I jot down my ideas that pops into my head and save it up for later. Lecture 16 is getting to know where to find inspiration, processing and learning resources, and researching techniques to use references that you can base off onto. Making combat-themed animation from scratch is a difficult task. If you have zero knowledge and memory of what goes into an action sequence, you're basically lost, and more potential to get stuck with the stale and unnatural movements. Observing and learning from various resource materials is a must, in order to avoid repetition. Our real combat and techniques is where we get to obtain knowledge on how to make our characters move in a certain way or style. After that section, we get to the last one. And this is where I get to demonstrate all of those lectures in 4 different ways. I'll be applying most of the techniques that we have discussed all throughout the lecture. First one, we have hand-to-hand combat, applying effects, using weapons, and environment and setting interaction. I'll also be talking and discussing the process for it and how certain techniques are applied. It may seem a lot to take in for now, but it's all about making steps and progress, no matter how small it may be. And by then, we can get by. Animation really takes up a lot of dedication, and to a certain extent, may get discouraged along the way. I myself experienced this when starting out. It was such a hindrance to get through. I remember how frustrated I was when I was trying to animate a character blinking, being all stressed out on trying to draw the frames over and over. But if it wasn't for me starting and getting to push through, I wouldn't be able to obtain this skill. I started animating because of other animators that I aspire to become, and I still continue to look forward to their works as I look forward to what I can do also. It's all about commitment, patience, and I hope you guys would find the lectures really helpful and get it to enjoy it also. For the next video, we'll be starting off with recollecting with the basics, fundamentals, and principles of animation, while also introducing you to the mindset and perception of an animator. Till next time, thank you so much.